Hello again. I hope you're enjoying the module so far. My name's Jack. I'm a visiting fellow for the university, and in my day job, look after coach development for the Football Association. So, in this video lecture, we're going to explore the theme of reflective practice. We'll look at what it is and isn't, why reflection is important, how you might reflect, and some tips that I've learned, which will include when, where, and with who you might reflect. So what's reflective practice? Well, the name would suggest that it's a doing thing, or more specifically, a process of thought and reasoning to make meaning from experiences. What and how we coach comes from how we interpret prior experiences. For example, you may have a certain practice or practices that you regularly use while coaching, and these may well be the sort of practices that you were exposed to and enjoyed yourself as an athlete. So reflection then is a skill that enables the coaches to learn and develop and can bridge the gap between the knowledge you acquire and putting that knowledge into practice. It's descriptive, analytical, and most importantly, critical. And it's this critical element that most coaches in my experience miss out when I encourage them to reflect. For example, two coaches I've been helping recently sent me their reflections of a session I observed. One coach just told the story of the session. It concentrated mainly on the size and the shape of the area being used, or the technicalities, the X's and O's if you like, and it was only from the viewpoint of the coach. So you could argue that it wasn't really reflective at all, as it was merely a timeline of events that had been rushed onto paper. The other coach sent me her reflection of the session, and it was clear that this coach had taken a step back from the session and tried to look at it from different viewpoints, including the players and the parents. It was critical in nature, and the coach had clearly thought about her behaviours, why and how she coached the way she had, and had also considered alternative methods and how they might have played out. She asked questions of herself and had taken time to process her thoughts. So reflective practice is about going much deeper than the surface of what just happened. Coaches can use reflection to explore why they acted as they did, what was happening in the situation and why, what they've learnt, and how they can use this knowledge in the future. One of the biggest challenges that coaches face when starting to reflect is actually knowing what to think back on. And as a result, many fall into the trap of just mulling things over rather than actually reflecting. So, why reflect? As a coach educator, I'm really interested in the process of how coaches learn and develop. And more recently, reflective practice is being encouraged as a means to develop expertise in coaching. Effective reflection allows you to examine and explore your experience of being a coach and everything it entails. This can help lead us to a new understanding and appreciation of your role as a coach and help make positive changes to your coaching style, interventions, and how you interact with your players, athletes, and significant others at your club. Being skilled at reflection isn't enough to develop coaching expertise alone, but it can definitely play a big part. That is if your goal is to become a better coach. So as I mentioned in the last video lecture, coaching sport is not a simple black and white activity. It's a complex process, and that means what might work one day for one athlete or group won't necessarily work on another day in another situation or set of circumstances. Indeed, every problem that you face as a coach is unique, and so being able to solve problems is a key skill of any coach. If you think about reflective practice like a muscle, the more you train it, the stronger it gets. And so, with regular reflective practice, your knowledge base will increase and you'll have a broader library from which to select appropriate solutions to the complex problems you're faced with. Reflection can help determine how a coach's practice aligns with the principles or beliefs, i.e., do they actually walk the talk? When practiced thoroughly, reflection can lead to identification of areas to be developed and serve to guide the coach towards adapting their practice accordingly. So, how to reflect? Unfortunately, doing reflection well is much easier said than done. And one of the barriers I find coaches have that stops them reflecting is time. But if we stop and break this down, the problem is actually value. Because if a coach truly values reflective practice, then they would make time for it. So we may need to think creatively about how we can best use time to reflect. One habit I've started to build into my own coaching is to use the drive home after a session more effectively. So instead of listening to the radio on the way home, I now leave my voice notes recorded on my phone whilst driving. I just unload my initial thoughts after the session into the phone for 10 minutes. This isn't necessarily true reflection, but it's a start point from which I can critically reflect. I now have some evidence of what happened whilst it's still fresh in my head. I can now use this short voice note a few days later to go through a more thorough process of reflection. In order to know what you're reflecting against, it would probably help for you to start to think about what your own coaching principles are. These can then act as your barometer. An example of this is something our national coaches use with the England teams. It's called the England DNA Coaching Fundamentals. And this is what all the national coaches believe that an England training should look and feel like. And they hold themselves accountable to meeting these principles. So you may have your own thoughts about what you value and believe to be true, and it's probably a good practice to document this so that you can start to hold yourself more accountable to the way you want to coach. Most coaches start by thinking about what went well and what could have gone better, but unfortunately don't go much further than that. So some kind of framework can help you, and you'll no doubt have been provided with examples of these already. There's no right model, but there's probably some models that are more right for you. One simple model is called what, so what, and now what. It can be considered as what? A description of what went well, what didn't go well, what actions did I take as a coach, what were the consequences, and what feelings or behaviours resulted. And then you move on to so what, which is theory building or understanding. So what does this tell me about the way I handled the situation? What do I understand differently after this session? So what other issues arise as a result of this session? And lastly, now what? So defining or identifying actions. So now what do I need to do or to keep doing or stop doing in future sessions? Now what might be the consequence of this action? Now what else do I need to consider if this action is to work? Now what do I need to feed into the plan for my next session or to improve things for next time? So this is one of many models, and this is quite a simple model that can act as a platform for critical reflection. And indeed, it's the ability to reflect critically that leads to the greatest return. So in other words, ask why and consider the pros and cons of what you do. Trying to develop a more critical perspective it's not a quick or easy process. I've learned that most coaches like to learn through personal interaction, and this is where having a critical friend can help. Could be a mentor, another coach, a player or an athlete, a parent, someone you can seek feedback from, discuss thoughts, and help to reveal any blind spots. You might even start to capture video footage of your coaching in order for you to have some hard evidence from which to start your reflective practice. I've put together a simple how-to guide on YouTube for this, using very basic equipment that you've probably already got. It's called How to Record and Film Yourself Coaching. So we've explored what reflection is, why you might practice it, and some ideas for how to reflect. And if you want some further information, then I recommend issue 15 of our free Boot Room magazine, which is dedicated to reflection. If you just Google the FA Boot Room issue 15, you'll find it. Thanks for taking time to watch this. I hope you took something useful away, and I'm off to reflect on this video lecture now.